Hey guys, today I'm going to be reading, it's actually, I haven't made a video in a long time. It's been about, I don't know, quite a few months. So I decided just to sit down. I got this new mic for Christmas. It's a Wave 3, really, really cool. I may or may not put the link in the description on where to find it, but it is a really, really good mic. Honestly, there's been a lot happening, right, just over the entire past. It's really been a lot to just kind of sit down and have the right equipment and to have the right state of mind to actually start just like pick up a book and begin recording it. I found this book over, I believe it was spring or Thanksgiving break. It's called Dangerous Personalities. It's basically what it says is an FBI profiler shows you how to identify and protect yourself from harmful people. I was thinking it would be good to read. Like nowadays, we have a lot of crazy people who do crazy things and really puts our lives in like chaos. So I was thinking, hey, this would be a good book to start off. One, to test this mic because I honestly love it, and two, to just get to know you. Some of the stuff in the it's been a while since I've read it, so I'm thinking about just putting the rough copy in the channel, or I'm just gonna tweak it, which I am a little bit lazy to do, to my fatal flaw. Um, so it's the book's by Joe Navarro. He's an FBI profiler. I should probably read the everything. Just I'll put the everything like that needed to so I won't get sued into the description, because I'm not sure if what I am doing is legal. I believe it is, because we have other people going around putting this stuff on, but I'm not sure if that's the right thing either. But I feel like if I give the person credit, um, and put in all the needed information, then I think we're gonna be a-okay. Um, what else? What else? What else? It has been a while, but yet again, it has been uh so long, and I'm jumping back and forth from topic to topic. I'm going back to the book, but honestly, with the book, I haven't read it in forever, so it's gonna be a very, very choppy recording. So I'm not making it to perfection. I'm just making it for my own enjoyment. Like, sheer, I don't want to get paid. I don't want to just, like, how would I put this? This is not, like, my job. My job is to just be me. To, I don't know. I'm rambling. Um, well, without further ado, you're gonna hear a lot more of my voice cutting in and out of this thing, so some like random commentary and such. They, I don't know how in depth this book will go onto it, so I'm assuming that there might be some touchy stuff here and there that people who are listening to this would be like, oh yeah, yeah, really that's really relatable, or yeah, I've been through that and it hurts. And hopefully I won't actually, like, we won't get there. But if that's so, let that be a disclaimer that yes, this will cover some very touchy subjects about different scenarios and what everything has to what not what everything is, what, like, what goes on in your life, because there are some helplines out there that can help you with those situations. But this, the last time I read, I never got through it. But from what I've read, it is a really, really good book, and I am really excited to share it with you. So, This book is dedicated to the victims of these dangerous personalities. That what makes it scarier, we witness every day. And sometimes as a society we just kind of brush it off and continue going like nothing really happened. So um I think I will read the author's, I will go like straight through, starting with the author's note, and then everything that needs to get through. I will butcher words. I unintentionally butcher a pronunciation. So I really don't need the, oh yeah, it was pronounced this way, because I will later on look at it in a dictionary or look up how to pronounce a word. So without further ado, without my pointless rambling, let's get into this book, Dangerous Personalities by Joe Navarro. Okay. Author's note. This book is intended to inform the reader or to validate what the reader may have witnessed or experienced. It is not intended as a clinical guide and should not replace the services of a trained or licensed professional. Whenever I talk to victims, I am keenly aware of what they have suffered and the need to protect their privacy and dignity. And so I have changed the names of all the victims I have interviewed. To further protect them, I altered slightly the details of events, dates, time, and location because some police reports and divorce filings are now searchable by specific words or groups of words. In the end, I have done my best to protect the victims without losing the character or manner to the offense and what they endured. Acknowledgements. Anytime you undertake an intellectual journey, there are so many people to thank. The bibliography is full of such individuals who took the time to share what they know. They have my deepest appreciation. The late Dr. Phil Quinn, who persuaded me to join the adjunct facility at the University of Tampa's criminology department, served as a mentor for more than a decade as I studied and explored these individuals. And as I, whoa, served as a mentor for more than a decade as I studied and explored these individuals' flawed of character or personality. To me, his perspective as a humanitarian, priest, psychologist, and criminologist was indeed unique and contributed significantly to my understanding of a complex subject. Michael Yavetz of the Sûreté de Quebec and fellow author has always honored me with his friendship and collaboration over the years on numerous projects here and in Canada, where he is a giant in his field. Once more, he did not let me down with his critiques of this book. A special thanks goes to Kaja Perina, editor-in-chief of Psychology Today, who took time from her busy schedule to comment on early drafts of the manuscript. Dr. Leonardo Territo receives my admiration, as well as my thanks. While finishing his 12th book, he took the time from his cramped schedule to go through this manuscript meticulously with me line by line. His vast experience working with dangerous personalities, including Ted Bundy, was extremely helpful. His foreword is his most kind. This book would not be possible without Steve Ross, director of the book division at Abrams Artists Agency. Steve is the kind of literary agent who gets things done, and he is, without a doubt, one of the most interesting people with whom to share a meal. I want to thank Alex Postman, Jennifer Levesque, and the rest of the team at Rodale Books, who have an appreciation for the welfare of others, both physically and mentally, and who, upon seeing this manuscript, immediately understood its potential to save lives. To our editors, Michael Zimmerman and Jeff Kostari, thank you for landing on this project on the run. You brought it all together. Well done. Early drafts of this work were carefully read and reread by Janice Hillary. I thank her for her insightful support and guidance. If only we could all have teachers like her. A teacher who cares about her students, even old ones like me. My gratitude goes out to Elizabeth Lee Barron at the University of Tampa's McDonald Kelsett Library, who generously assisted me with finding reference material and who, like my good friend Mark Reeser of the FBI, always makes me laugh. To Tony Ciara Pointer, who I am indebted to you once again for shaping my words and thoughts, but more important, for being inquisitive, for sharing ideas and concepts that are transformative, and for being singularly meticulous. What a gift you have for writing and for making my task so much easier. Thank you, my friend. Also, I must thank my family here and in Europe for tolerating my absences as I struggled with writing a manuscript that was 3 times larger than what the reader will see. To my wife Thyrith, for whom I found a profound respect, I must thank you for who you are, for providing valued counsel and providing and loving support, and for your patience as I struggled to work on this book for more than a year. You are a blessing in every sense of the word who all too often has to insulate me from distractions. And last, I thank my parents who honor me by calling me their son and for having provided me a loving environment since Dangerous Personalities. Joe Navarro, M.A., FBI Special Agent, retired, Tampa, November 2013. I echo Joe's thanks to Steve Ross of Abrams Artist Agency, to our editors Mike Zimmerman and Jeff Costari, and to the team at Rodale Books for all their efforts on behalf of this book. Thank you to Donna Munker for being the staunchest, most loving, caring friend and fellow writer anyone could have. Love and gratitude to my husband, Donald, for always being in my army and in my corner, for all the way we can talk about the darkest of the dark and brightest of the light. To Joe Navarro, thank you for our work together and for our many interviews and thoughtful conversations about the ways of dangerous personalities, a strange terrain you know all too well. Thank you for your tireless work on every aspect of this book, for your dedication, for your humor, and for your ferocious joy in learning and work. When you email me to say, I'm on it, I know you are on it. Finally, at the risk of sounding unserious, I am grateful that our cat Lucy was often curled soothingly within arm's reach on her fleece perch when it felt painful to write about these personalities. Tony Ciara Pointer, New York City, December 2013. Forward. When the first edition of this book was published in 2014, a reporter asked me, "Who is your intended audience?" My answer was straightforward. This book is for everyone, because all of us will be victimized at some point in our life by one or more of the 4 personality types I describe. As a former FBI Special Agent, member of the elite National Security Division's Behavioral Analysis Program, and senior criminal profiler in the Tampa Division of the FBI, I learned a few things about people who are most likely to harm others. We read about major crimes perpetrated by dangerous personalities in the media, but in fact, most people who are victimized physically, mentally, emotionally, psychologically, or financially rarely make headlines. You yourself may have been victimized by a dangerous personality and likely never reported it. Sadly, many people suffer in silence. That is why I wrote this book. This second edition is a testament to the readers of the first edition, who found the information not only useful, but also important in validating what they had experienced. Finally, they understood the destructive nature of those individuals, so severely flawed of character that there is little likelihood they would ever change and stop hurting others. Based on reader feedback I've received over the past 3 years, the most popular and useful part of this book has been the checklists. They were designed so that the average person can assess others for pathological personality traits based on their behavior, what they do, and say each day. Tested over a decade of work while I was in the FBI, these comprehensive checklists are invaluable in identifying individuals who may be harmful or toxic, as well as dangerous. Most of us don't have access to medical professionals who can help us evaluate others 24 hours a day. This is where the checklist and other descriptive material in the book are most helpful. Because you and I make observations every day and have direct access to individuals who may harm us, we're often better positioned to identify behaviors that others may miss. With the assistance of checklists, we can determine whether we're living with, dating, working for, or managing someone who will victimize us or others. Since publication, I've received hundreds of emails, letters, and social media posts from all over the world thanking me for sharing this information and for unveiling, as one put it, that the medical profession seems to hide from the average person. From a woman who had to borrow the book from a library to review the checklist so her abusive husband would not see her, to a millionaire in South Florida who was contemplating suicide because of how his wife had treated him over the years. Readers whose painful stories drive home the sad truth and that dangerous personalities can harm anyone, anywhere, at any time. Young, old, men, women, gay, bisexual, and a housewife, a CEO, retired, active duty police officer, prison warden, senior bank managers, a dancer, a rehabilitated alcoholic, a woman cheated out of her life savings by her own grown child, and a middle-aged man who finally understood why his now-deceased mother treated him like the way she did from the time he was born. These and more from all walks of life have written to me about how this book offered them clarity. In particular, readers appreciated the accuracy of the checklist in describing to a T, as many said, how toxic these individuals had been in their life. At last, someone was being honest with them about just how malignant and destructive these personalities can be. While my original goal was to help those most vulnerable to dangerous personalities, people in abusive relationships at home or at work, something unexpected happened. After the election in 2016 of President Donald J. Trump, I began receiving queries from people as far away as Australia, and the messages usually read something like this. I bought the book for myself to help me deal with someone I know, but I just compared it to some of the things that President Trump has done, or said against the checklist, and I think he qualifies as a narcissist. A clinician even wrote to me saying that the rules of her profession prohibit her from commenting on the mental health of someone not directly under her care. But when she is asked if President Trump is a narcissist, she says, "Read Joe Navarro's book and come to your own conclusion." During my FBI career, I used these checklists to assess criminals, spies, and terrorists, as well as foreign leaders. In many ways, the book is an extension of my FBI work. It was not meant to exclude anyone from being examined, regardless of their social status, gender, religious beliefs, nationality, or political associations. It was designed to warn people about dangerous personalities based solely on their behaviors and to help them determine for themselves whether they or others might be at the risk of being victimized or severely or adversely affected. Still, I never imagined that the checklist would be used to assess a sitting U.S. president. I will admit, just as many readers of the first edition have, I too have correlated the behaviors of President Trump that I have observed directly against all four checklists: the narcissistic personality, the emotionally unstable personality, the paranoid personality, and the predator in this book, and have found President Trump to possess many of the traits associated with the narcissistic personality. I find this conclusion alarming and dangerous, that someone so flawed of character now controls the most powerful military in the known universe and can release nuclear weapons on a whim. But that is just my personal opinion based on the checklist and my 4-decade career in law enforcement. As citizens, each of us makes our own assessments of leaders and elected officials. It is our duty to conduct our own legal diligence with the same care we might exercise in picking a school, a neighborhood, or someone to care for our children. For those who are concerned, if you care about your country as much as I do, then you should do your civic duty and exercise your responsibility as an American citizen and patriot, and use the checklist to make your own assessment and see where the chips fall. That is our individual responsibility. I hope you will be honest and impartial and check off those behaviors that you have personally witnessed or noticed as they relate to the sitting president. If that is your concern, I hope you will do this with much care and diligence as you would if your daughter or son were in a relationship with someone you suspected might be toxic or dangerous. If you see from the totality of checked off items that this person is severely flawed of character, then and only then can you make your own personal decision and determine whether what you thought, didn't believe, or refused to consider may be true. It is easy to look the other way, to not care, or to be so partisan in one's political beliefs that no matter what a person in office does, it can go unchallenged, minimized, rationalized, or justified as okay. It is harder to live with the reality and legacy that we bequeath ourselves as we look away or are indifferent. Ask the German people about how they looked away in the 1930s when the brown skirts marched through the streets of Berlin. Ask those 500,000 refugees who ignored a bearded rebel leader in the Escambray Mountains of Cuba in 1959, and then had to flee for their lives a year later. We cannot ignore those who would hurt us or others physically, psychologically, emotionally, or financially. It does not matter if we are married to them, work for them, or are governed by them. As a Cuban refugee who came to America fleeing a tyrannical megalomaniac, it has been my privilege to defend this country from enemies, both foreign and domestic. I may be limited in how I can do that, but I still feel that responsibility. In fact, we all have a responsibility to our families, neighbors, friends, and each other to warn of harm. However, and whenever it comes, by whatever ability we possess. Poet Ella Wheeler Wilcox presciently warned us to sin by silence. When we should protest, makes cowards out of men. To those who can victimize you are out there, and they are counting on most people to remain quiet, to look the other way, to be indifferent. We have a solemn responsibility as citizens to protect ourselves and each other from dangerous personalities, be they social predators masquerading as priests, husbands, battering their wives, or politicians abusing their office for personal gain. As I said, this book was intended for those victimized at home or in the workplace, and it still is. But this is also intended for those who seek to understand anyone in whom they have placed under their trust or confidence. If the original mission of this book was expanded because people are genuinely concerned about those who lead them, then I am gladdened. If this work serves to keep one or more person, group, or institution from being victimized, then I can say I have repaid my debt to the country that took me and my family in with open arms when no one else would. Joe Navarro, September 29th, 2017. Introduction. Why I wrote this book and how to use it. On June 27th, 1975, a young woman named Susan Sue Curtis went missing from an otherwise very safe college campus. She was 15 years old and attending a youth conference at Brigham University at Provo, Utah, where I was a rookie police officer. I conducted the initial investigation into her disappearance. We interviewed friends and family for clues and learned that she'd gone back to her room to clean her new braces. But when I searched her room, her toothbrush was dry. She had never made it back. We could account for some of her activity. Her lunch ticket had been used. But we were limited in what we could reconstruct. This was before cameras and ubiquitous, on campuses and cell phones kept us all connected. We talked with her family. I still remember their fathomless pain and desperation. Their trauma was devastating and sad, so sad. Sue was never found, and eventually all reasonable leads were exhausted. But the mystery of her disappearance always bothered me because I had been on duty that night patrolling the campus, and somehow felt partially responsible. I kept a copy of the case file containing a large photograph of her, and for years afterwards, I would scan crowds looking for a face that even remotely resembled hers. I kept the file too, to remind me of my failure to protect that innocent soul. Years passed, and I went on to become an FBI agent. Then one day, I got a call from a Salt Lake City investigator. "There's something you should know," he told me. "We never found Sue Curtis, but we know who took her." He went on to say that a good-looking young man had been driving around campus in a Volkswagen that night, looking for a victim. That man had finally admitted to kidnapping and killing Sue Curtis. His name was Theodore Ted Bundy, a man who would eventually confess to the murder of 35 young women in 4 different states. It's still hard to think about the almond-eyed girl with long hair whose photo I looked at day after day, whose diary I had read, whose clothing I smelled for signs of where she might have been, whose shoes I felt for moisture or dirt as I desperately looked for any possible clue to her whereabouts. It's very possible that I had seen her killer that night driving about on campus. I would have looked twice for his car for not having a BYU student or faculty sticker, but many didn't that day, as there were so many visitors on campus. No illegal activity was seen or reported. It was like any other day, except that on this day, there was a dangerous personality on campus. A predator and serial killer who would go on to kill many times more. BYU is one of the safest campuses in the country. Yet there had been an abduction and a life taken. How had this happened? And who would do such a thing? The realization that one person can do so much damage, not just to victims, but also to their loved ones, was chilling. I was all of 22, a police officer in uniform, when I first truly understood that there are dangerous personalities on this planet, and that because of them, we can never be completely safe. I shudder to think what Sue Curtis, all of 15, was made to understand that night, alone with a predator, before she died. I am convinced that this singular event drove me years later to serve as a criminal profiler in the Tampa division of the FBI and later in the FBI's elite National Security Division Behavioral Analysis Program. I felt compelled to understand criminal and abnormal behavior, and this objective dominated much of my bureau career. Sue Curtis disappeared on my watch. Those were my words and initials on that investigative report. That tragic event drove my passion to seek answers from those who knew best, the criminals themselves and their victims. What I learned from them over a period of 4 decades is that there are certain personalities who hurt people the most. Over and over, they are responsible for... Sorry to yawn. They are responsible for crime, for torment, for misery, for financial losses, as well as for loss of life. This book is about those dangerous personalities that cause us so much pain and suffering. What I learned about criminals and normal behavior and dangerous personalities, you should know also, because it may save your life. How the 4 personalities came together. While working for the FBI as a profiler, I began to see a pattern emerging as to the personality types who seemed to dominate our attention. These were people who were constantly making others miserable, breaking laws, engaging in risky behavior, taking advantage of or abusing others, and in general causing pain and suffering. Not once, not twice, but repeatedly. Through my own efforts and with the guidance of others, I learned that there are certain personalities who will always be nasty, who are deceitful and manipulative, who derive pleasure from taking advantage of others, and who don't respect people or laws. They are exhausting emotionally and can be cruel, callous, and exploitative. And they will repeat their behavior over and over without concern for the physical or psychological damage they inflict on others. From investigating, arresting, and talking to rapists, murderers, kidnappers, bank robbers, white-collar criminals, pedophiles, and terrorists, I learned, sometimes the hard way, that dangerous personalities can be very deceptive. I just realized I just made a big mistake. I skipped an entire section. So, I'm gonna flip back to it. It's the chapter, I read the section after this one. As I just had to run down, get some water, and refresh my mind. So when I came back, I flipped to the right one, and I was like, wait. What happened? But now that we're good to go, let's pretend that didn't happen, and let's get back into it. The reality of dangerous personalities. By now we're familiar with the grim headline: lone killer walks into an office building, classroom, campground, or other area, and seemingly without provocation, opens up with an assault rifle or other weapons, killing or maiming scores of innocent victims. And after each of these events, after the mayhem is over and the victims are buried or patched up, or the latter no doubt traumatized for life, as are their families, the question is asked, who could do something like this? And could it have been prevented? When these violent events happen, they dominate the news and preoccupy us for months. The massacres at Virginia Tech, at Columbine High School, and Sandy Hook Elementary School, and in Oslo, Norway, to name just a few. Unfortunately, these horrible mass killings happen all too often. In America alone, they occur on average 18 to 20 times per year, coming at us with almost metronomic frequency, more than one per month. Such events are almost numbing. How many were killed this time? We ask incredulously. Was it 8, 16, 26, or 77, as in Utoya, Norway, on July 22nd, 2011, at the hands of Anders Behring Breivik, I think. I keep on mispronouncing names, I'm sorry. Yet, as staggering as those violent events are, they don't represent the full picture of who victimizes the most people. The sad truth is that for every mass killer, there are hundreds more who kill one child at a time, one date at a time, or one spouse at a time. And these events sometimes barely make it to page 6 in major newspapers. The mayhem that occurs under the radar without making the national news is a kind of crime, torment, and suffering many of us are more likely to experience. The dangerous personalities among us harm us behind closed doors at home, at church, at school, and in the office, often preying in secrecy on the unsuspecting or the trusting. And for the most part, no one finds out until it's too late. When they do make headlines, it's on those rare occasions when they get caught. There are, they are responsible for many of the nearly 15,000 homicides, 4.8 million domestic assaults, 2.2 million burglaries, 354,000 robberies, and 230,000 plus sexual assaults that occur annually in the U.S., many of which go unreported and unpunished. Or like Bernard Madoff, they may embezzle money from the elderly or even friends for years on such a grand scale, in his case, that the economic well-being of thousands was compromised. They can go undisturbed for decades, destroying lives as the convicted child rapist Jerry Sandusky did at Pennsylvania State University. Think back to those times in your own life when someone stole something from you or took hurtful advantage of you. Perhaps your house was burglarized or your car was broken into. Perhaps you dated someone who turned out to be toxic, or you were bullied at school or at work. Perhaps you've been assaulted, mugged, or sexually abused and never reported it, or if you did, nothing came of it. Much goes on around us that is never reported, and when it is rare that those responsible are incarcerated. For 60 years, criminologists have known that fewer than 1% of criminals are ever incarcerated for their crimes. What this means for us is that most of the people who can hurt us, these dangerous personalities, will avoid official scrutiny, wreaking havoc in our lives without ever getting caught, or persisting for years before they are stopped. And that's just physical harm. Not all wounds are physical. Most of the people who cause us harm will also do it emotionally, psychologically, or financially. They too are dangerous personalities because they put us at risk in their own way. How 4 dangerous personalities came together. While working for the FBI as a profiler, I began to see a pattern emerging as to the personality types who seem to dominate our attention. These were people who were constantly making others miserable, breaking laws, and engaging in risky behavior, taking advantage of or abusing others, and in general causing pain and suffering, not once, not twice, but repeatedly. Through my own efforts, and with the guidance of others, I learned that there are certain personalities who will always be nasty, who are deceitful and manipulative, who derive pleasure from taking advantage of others, and who don't respect people or laws. They are exhausting emotionally and can be cruel, callous, or exploitative. They will repeat their behavior over and over without concern for the physical or psychological damage they inflict on others. From investigating, arresting, and talking to rapists, murderers, kidnappers, bank robbers, white-collar criminals, pedophiles, and terrorists, I learned, sometimes the hard way, that dangerous personalities can be very deceptive. They may look at and act quite normal on the surface. They may even be intelligent, interesting, charming, and attractive. But they are always dangerous. In 1995, I met Kelly Therese Warren for the first time, 30 years old. She lived in Warner Robins, Georgia, with her daughter and husband. Kelly had served in the military handling secretarial duties and had been discharged honorably after serving her tour in Germany. Her husband worked at a lumber yard, and she did various odd jobs, including babysitting and working at a convenience store. Kelly always had a smile for me and would welcome me in with a hug. What little food they had, she willingly shared, and she always made sure that to top off my glass of sweetened iced tea. She talked to me more than a dozen times over a summer, always with a smile. Kelly told me what life had been like as a U.S. Army soldier stationed in Germany and what it was like to grow up poor in the South. She was funny and cheerful and always quick to answer my questions and fill in the gaps. For nearly a year, she provided my FBI colleagues and me with information that we used to pursue a criminal. And not just a criminal, but a Soviet bloc spy. For a year, we followed Kelly's every word, every bit of information she enthusiastically volunteered, we pursued. But something wasn't right. Nothing Kelly was telling us was panning out. It took a long time to figure out because most of the leads were in Europe, not in the US. Finally, we were able to confront her with the facts. That's when we learned that not only had she lied, but that it was she who had placed her nation at risk. It was she who, in her mere 20s, at the height of the Cold War, had put all of Central Europe in danger by selling to the Soviet bloc highly classified war plans that she had typed. Kelly, with her sweet smile and sweet tea, was yet one more example of how dangerous personalities can be charming, funny, interesting, but they can also put a whole nation, or in her case, a host of nations, at risk. Kelly is serving a 25-year sentence for committing espionage. These individuals are flawed not only in personality, but also in character, that is, in morality and ethics. In essence, they can't be trusted to tell you the truth, to care about and protect you, or to keep you safe. And because of their laws, invariably their behaviors leave behind a debris field of human suffering. Over time, I came to realize that there were 4 personality types responsible for most of the harm we were seeing. These 4 dangerous personalities daily put us at risk financially, emotionally, or physically, and they are the personalities we will focus on in this book. The narcissistic personality, the emotionally unstable personality, the paranoid personality, and the predator. My intention. Dangerous Personalities is my attempt to share with you what I know about those who will hurt you. Dangerous personalities are all around us. They may be your neighbors, friends, boss, date, spouse, relatives, or parents. They may be community leaders or professionals responsible for your education, money, health, or safety. And that is why we have to be particularly on guard. Note about terminology. Some readers may wonder why I choose to use non-clinical terms such as predator or emotionally unstable to describe 2 of the dangerous personalities in this book. This is a valid question. I wanted to use the terms that lay people can understand immediately and that would transfer easily across cultures. It would have been very easy, and perhaps beneficial for book sales, as some friends suggested, to use the term psychopath to describe the predator. Unfortunately, the term psychopath has become so overused that even some professionals use the term carelessly, when the more discerning would tell you that conduct disorder, sociopath, antisocial personality disorder, or, as the World Health Organization prefers, dissocial personality disorder, which would be more accurate or precise. The medical and mental health literature clearly differentiates between a psychopath, a sociopath, an individual with antisocial personality disorder, and an individual with conduct disorder. To label someone using those particular terms, one must be very aware of the specific criteria established by the mental health community or by researchers such as Robert Hare. As complex as this is for professionals, it is more so for the lay reader. That's why I decided to use the term predator. which encapsulates the fact that we are dealing with individuals who prey on others, to take advantage of others, and have little regard for rules or for the rights and sanctity of others. Similarly, terms such as borderline personality, histrionic, conduct disorder, or bipolar disorder are a mystery to most people not familiar with the full clinical meaning of these terms. So I use the appellation emotionally unstable to encapsulate the essence of this personality so that the average person, and that includes me, can understand. I am also aware that some psychological terms, such as borderline or histrionic, can become so highly charged with negative meanings and connotations that they stigmatize or are used pejoratively while providing little clarity as to what is at issue. For these reasons, I avoided using these terms. Narcissistic and paranoid personality were used, however, because these terms are widely understood thanks to their long pedigree in mythology and in literature. Okay, back to the story. Or book. Evil, crime, or suffering comes at us in many ways, and rarely does it wave a flag or blow a whistle to say, "Get ready, I'm coming." In fact, from my own experience as an FBI special agent, I know that criminals are incredibly adept at getting close to us so they can take advantage. Dennis Rader, also known as the BTK killer, hid in plain sight for 30 years, living in Park City, Kansas, near Wichita. Rader was a church council leader and dog catcher slash compliance officer for the city. He was also a serial killer, at least 10 victims, who liked to bind, torture, and kill, thus the BTK appellation. Something he kept secret from his wife and kids, as well as from city officials and his church for 3 decades. David Russell Williams, a decorated Canadian Forces colonel, also hid a secret from his wife and fellow officers, that he was a serial rapist and killer. Or how about the scores of Catholic priests who for decades hid their crimes of child abuse under the robes of the clergy. It's cases like these that make us wonder, whom can we trust? How can we detect and avoid harm before it happens? In the end, we must rely on our own innate abilities to sense danger, or our powers of observation, and the behaviors of others that alert us that something isn't right. Sometimes the only person making the key observations that may save you is you. Sitting next to that odd or prickly person in a cubicle at work or behind that closed door at home. Consider the 2003 case of Ariel Castro, who held, tortured, and raped 3 girls in his house for more than a decade, more than 3,600 days. Just think about that. Within hours of his arrest, neighbors spoke to news reporters of how bewildered they were, as Castro was known as a sunny face, someone who was good with children. One neighbor who lived 2 doors down had known Castro for 22 years said, "I feel a little guilty. I should have spotted it." But what if those neighbors, family members, or his fellow musicians and band members, Castro played the guitar and sang, had been better observers? Most people, unfortunately, are simply not motivated to look closer. In fact, society frowns on meddling in other people's business. And frankly, most people simply don't know what to look for. Sadly, social blindness is the rule, not the exception. I don't want you to be victimized. I don't want you to go through what I have witnessed and what so many have suffered. I want you to have a happy, fulfilling life. But I know there are dangerous personalities out there, ever ready to torment you or take what you value. If you have any doubt, just read the newspaper, and you'll know why we have to be prepared. Invariably, a person who has been victimized later asks, "How could this happen to me? Why didn't I see the signs?" We've all experienced this, including me. while hindsight is 20/20. Foresight is mostly blind. No one has taught us what to look for. We who work criminal cases know that there are almost always personality traits or behavioral clues that, to the informed, say, there are issues. Pay attention, beware, or get away. But either they weren't recognized, or people chose to ignore them. This is where dangerous personalities comes in. I want to help you anticipate when someone is going to try to take advantage of you or hurt you. Safety is our responsibility. It cannot be outsourced, and if we try to do so, we'll be disappointed. Police departments are notoriously overburdened. Mental health clinics are swamps. The courts still let too many get away. And, as already mentioned, the majority of those who do wrong rarely get caught. Thus, our safety is up to us. How nice it would be if we could just block these individuals out of our lives as easily as we do spam or pop-up messages on the internet with one click. But we can't. That means we have to be on guard. I want to share this information with you because we don't have experts at our side 24/7 to turn to and ask, what do you think? Is he dangerous? Is he a good person? Can I trust her to care for my child? Should I invest in him? Should I let her be my roommate? Does this manager have the capacity to ruin my company? Should I bring him home and let him spend the night? These decisions are our responsibility, yet few of us are prepared to assess others properly in order to answer these questions. When we fail to answer them today, we may find the sad answer on the front page of tomorrow's newspaper. Now you can take an active role in ensuring your safety. Dangerous Personalities provides you with expert advice in a simple, practical way so that you can take control of your life. I want to help you learn how to assess others for flaws of character or personality to reduce the chance that you'll be taken advantage of emotionally, psychologically, financially, or physically. Benjamin Franklin said it best. An investment in knowledge pays the best interest. I would only add that an investment in this knowledge may save your life. The Dangerous Personality Checklists. In the world where I worked, we never had the luxury of days or weeks to assess an individual. Decisions about whom to investigate, whom to focus on, to follow, question, confront, engage, or arrest had to be made quickly. After all, when you're negotiating with a kidnapper, you can't say, hang on a minute, we have to ask a committee of experts what your personality is really like so we know how to deal with you. It doesn't work that way. Real life happens in real time, and decisions have to be made in an instant. In crisis situations, our general knowledge of human behavior was critical, but so was the specific information we gradually collected as to how these dangerous personalities behaved. In time, as I studied and talked to these individuals, as well as to experts and to victims, their key features became formalized into checklists to help me assess these individuals in real time in the high-stakes situations we confront daily in the FBI. What only select a few FBI criminal profilers previously knew, and what I myself used repeatedly and refined over the years, I will now share with you. Chapter by chapter, I'll describe the defining traits of each of the 4 personalities, how they behave, how they make us feel, and where and how we may encounter them, with examples from everyday life, my own crime files, the headlines. I conclude each chapter with the Dangerous Personalities checklist specific to that personality type, describing key warnings and signs in plain language. The checklists include a practical, easy-to-use scoring system to help you gauge where this person's behavior fall on the spectrum from mild to moderate to severe. In other words, from irritating to toxic to dangerous. I've actually been thinking about how I was going to go about this checklist. I think I might create like some kind of document of the checklist in this book, or I can so you have that like for if you don't have the book, you can check the checklist because I will read it over at the end of the chapter, and I will try to put the information in that in like a document, and then I will post that in the description if I decide. Hopefully by the end of this book, I will. I'll have everything done. So let's just continue. The checklist will help you understand the following: the most common personality traits and behaviors that say proceed with caution. The traits, behaviors, or events that appear normal but that in fact communicate danger. What you can anticipate in the future from this individual. The possible threat level to you and those who associate with this individual. Each checklist is very specific and highly detailed, far more detailed, in fact, than those used by mental health professionals when diagnosing personality disorders. As you look at the checklists, you may wonder why they are so long. The answer is simple. Assessing for dangerous personalities is often complex and subtle. The checklists are lengthy because they need to be. Details ensure accuracy and help avoid the risk of overlooking meaningful or nuanced behaviors that the layperson may have forgotten or may not have realized are significant, but that are important in identifying a particular dangerous personality. When it comes to saving lives or keeping others safe, I have to consider what is useful to the widest readership, and also what is necessary. Just as an experienced pilot uses a lengthy pre-flight and landing checklist to ensure maximum safety for all on board, so we must use comprehensive checklists to be as careful and as precise as we can. When it comes to dangerous personalities, detail and accuracy trump brevity and ambiguity. As you read this book and use the checklist, you will notice that unlike most books on the subject, there are very few statistics. There is, in my view, a valid reason for this. When we say that this or that personality type accounts for 1 or 6 or 2.8% of the population, I believe we're doing a disservice to readers by inviting them to focus on probabilities/statistics rather than on behaviors. There's a risk that someone will say, well, I have a 96% chance of being safe, so I don't need to worry about dealing with that type of person. Many smokers delude themselves by focusing on the statistics relating to those who don't get lung cancer rather than on the behaviors and lifestyle that lead to lung cancer. This mindset is precisely what we want to avoid. All it takes is one encounter with one dangerous personality. On the street, at work, in your car, in your house, or in your bedroom, to completely ruin your life. Thus, in this book, we focus on behaviors, not on statistics or probabilities. I also know from the research, more information referred to the 5th edition of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, known as the DSM-5, that certain disorders are more often diagnosed or associated with a specific gender. Antisocial personality disorder, for instance, is more often diagnosed in males, while borderline personality disorder is more often diagnosed in females. These two disorders have many of the behavioral traits of the predator and the emotionally unstable personality, respectively discussed in this book. For the same reason that it's inadvisable to focus too narrowly on statistics, it would be a mistake to associate one disorder or personality type with a specific gender. We don't want to be blinded by fixating on statistics or gender bias. What we want to do is focus on behaviors. Behaviors overwhelmingly will define the dangerous personality type. An important caution. As you read this book, keep in mind that I am not a mental health professional, and this is not a diagnostic book. Clinical diagnosis is reserved for clinicians who have spent years training in the art of science and diagnosis, using specific criteria established by the American Psychiatric Association. While professionals may find the material in this book helpful, this book is not meant to be used for diagnostic purposes. The checklists were designed as an assessment tool for those wanting to identify dangerous personalities or behaviors associated with dangerous personalities, just as we prudently assess whom to allow into our homes or whom to employ. This book and these checklists likewise help us to be more thorough in our assessments of others. This is a descriptive book about how to identify dangerous personalities through their behaviors. It's also a book on how to protect yourself and your loved ones. There are many excellent books and resources on mental illness, abnormal psychology, and personal disorders, as well as their possible causes and treatment. This isn't one of them. You should seek out those sources if that's the perspective you're looking for. This book is strictly from my perspective as a former FBI special agent who had to deal with these kinds of dangerous individuals on a frequent either face-to-face as a target of my investigations or in consultations. My approach, therefore, is not from the healing arts. I leave that to mental health professionals. The selected resources and the bibliography offer a selection of valuable resources that draw from the healing arts, crisis centers, criminologists, law enforcement, and forensics, as well as insights from the victims themselves. I hope you'll explore these additional resources and continue to educate yourself long after you finish this book. I truly believe you're best served when you consider what many authors have to say, rather than just one. Many books explore why these personalities are the way they are. You will not find that focus here, for this reason. When someone takes pleasure in humiliating you on a daily basis, has cleaned out your bank account, has molested your child, or is choking you with a belt, does it really matter why that person is this way? The only thing that matters, because you are not a clinician or a researcher, is your safety and the well-being of those you love. During my decades in law enforcement, the more insight we had into a suspect's probability, the greater the probability we had of catching that individual or preventing further criminal acts. For example, in hostage situations, knowing whether we were dealing with someone who was primarily paranoid, a predator, a narcissist, or highly unstable could make a big difference in how we communicated with this person, how often, and by what means. It also helped us determine what actions might be taken to rescue the hostage. Knowing the individual's personality type gave us insight into the probable outcome of this situation, as personality traits often dictate the trajectory of how someone is likely to behave. Which is why we say in behavioral analysis, the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. Or to quote legendary thinker on human nature, we are what we repeatedly do. Aristotle. If you seek to know the why of dangerous personalities, this is not the book for you. But if you want to know how they think and behave, if you want to protect yourself, your loved ones, or your business, then this is a good place to start. One last thought before we begin. While my training and personal philosophy dictate that everyone deserves to be treated ethically and with respect, I also believe no one has a social obligation to be victimized. Let me repeat that. No one has a social obligation to be victimized. That's why I'm writing this book. I care only about one thing: your safety and well-being. I care about you, your children, your parents, or your grandparents not becoming victims. My goal is not to scare you, but to empower you. I want to sensitize you to these personalities so you can spot them before they can hurt you or those you love, and help you distance yourself if they're causing you harm. I want to help you develop your safety radar for detecting behaviors that signal caution. Be careful with this person. Slow down. Don't trust. The more we can do this as individuals, the better protected we'll be as a society. Then maybe the havoc wrought by the extremely dangerous personalities of the world can be contained long before they make headlines. If this book helps you, if this book helps you identify and protect yourself from someone who can hurt you physically, emotionally, psychologically, or financially, then I have accomplished my goal. Chapter 1. It's all about me. The Narcissistic Personality. Of all the labels that are carelessly bandied about, narcissist is probably one of the most overused and least understood. It's a popular term with ancient origins, the Greek myth of Narcissus, who fell in love with his reflection. Yet, what it really means can be perplexing. Many people think of a narcissist as someone who perhaps names hotels after himself or wants to be in the spotlight, maybe a character on reality TV. Certainly plenty of people love the limelight, but the kind of narcissist we're talking about goes far and beyond self-promotion by acting in ways that are toxic and dangerous. From this point forward, I will use terms narcissist and narcissistic personality interchangeably. Narcissistic personalities care only for themselves, their needs, and their priorities. While you and I appreciate attention, the narcissist craves it and manipulates people and stimulation situations to get it. While you and I work hard to be successful, the narcissistic personality connives to succeed and may cheat, lie. Oh wait, no, that was succeed. My mistake. To succeed and may lie, cheat, embellish the truth, or scheme to get ahead, uncaring of how others are affected. These personalities can be found in every level of our society, right up to the top, where history's grim records shows that they've started wars and exterminated populations. But they're also found in the cubicle or in the bar stool next to you, at home, on the team, in the classroom, and even in your spiritual community. Cinderella, the classic tale of the cruel stepmother and stepsisters obsessed with themselves, epitomizes the exploitative nature of narcissism. These are people who live selfishly at others' expense. The most famous version of Cinderella is the Disney one, but historically there are more than 300 variants of the tale. Apparently many cultures have seen fit to warn us about this personality, with a good reason. Like Cinderella's stepmothers and stepsisters, these personalities see few faults in themselves and view anyone who doesn't value them as highly as they value themselves as nobodies, to be denigrated or tormented. Okay. And while Walt Disney's Cinderella enjoys a magical happy ending, in real life there's no fairy godmother or prince to save us from these bullies when we're dealing with the narcissistic personality or protection. Our protection is up to us. Okay, welcome back to video the Dangerous Personalities Part 1. Unfortunately, the reason why I have a 0.5 is because OBS crashed in the middle of me recording. My part 1 was supposed to be a certain length, but instead it just decided to conk out on me in when I went to have dinner. Sorry, my brain is kind of fried right now. But luckily, I said in the description of the previous video that that there was just like this silence, or like I just stopped mid-sentence, which I did for one time. I had to answer the door. but I feared that I had stopped mid-sentence when OBS crashed. When I got back, I found out that it had just like left me in a sense. So I will try my best to create a full sturdy part one from where we left off in point 5, which was actually a good stopping point, honestly. To if I because I don't remember ever starting on the last portion of it. So that's a very, very good thing. So that makes me really happy that I have everything where I want it to be, where I need it to be. So without further ado, there'll probably be more do, less but okay, let's get started. So I believe we left off on the way of the narcissistic personality. So if not, I'm sorry. I probably won't remember. Narcissism isn't the same as confidence. True confidence reflects admirable strength of character. The narcissist's confidence is really arrogance, a character flaw leading to grandiose ideas and the relentless pursuit of the narcissist's desires, often at others' expense. Some grandiose ideas can be good for society. Look at the advances that came from Edison's vision of a world powered by electricity and Kennedy's mission to land on the moon, to name just two. Walt Disney, too, had a grandiose idea, a magical place for children and adults to enjoy themselves, which would become Disneyland, Walt Disney World, and Epcot. The narcissist's grandiosity is entirely different. Consider Jim Jones, whose vision for Jonestown in Guyana was to create a place where people would pay tribute to him as a supreme individual. The price of admission? Your life savings and your free will. You also had to be willing to kill your own children and yourself by drinking cyanide-laced Kool-Aid, along with more than 900 other followers. In the first instance, a grandiose idea leads to a place where we can fulfill our dream. Sorry about the yawn. It's 9:16 p.m. In the other, our worst dreams are fulfilled. The difference isn't one of ideas, but of personality type and character flaws. One seeks happiness for all. The other seeks adoration and happiness only for himself. This is why I want to warn you about the defining traits of this dangerous personality. Egocentric. As children, we all go through a phase where we feel we're the center of the world, with a high sense of entitlement. Narcissistic personalities essentially never outgrow this phase. Their childlike need to be constantly attended to leads them to do everything from the ridiculous to the unthinkable to be the center of attention or to get their way. They'll arrive late to meetings, parties, and family events, delaying activities and making others wait, and even make sacrifices on their behalf. They may storm in or make dramatic entrances just to get everyone's attention. They have no hesitation about letting you know they're the smartest person in the room. Some are shameless name droppers, habitually mentioning whom they know, whom they've lunched with, and on, making sure you know that they associate with important people. Looking good in every sense is vital to narcissists. You may see them preening in mirrors. They are highly aware of their physical appearance, which can lead to fitness or cosmetic surgery fanaticism, and use their presence to have an impact on others. Whether it's making sure all heads turn at a party or ensuring everyone sees they've got the best, biggest, or most expensive thing. Some narcissistic personalities present themselves as being very accomplished, but in effect they've accomplished little, which doesn't stop them from acting superior, like seeing themselves as a great inventor, artist, musician, thinker, leader, or singer. When things don't go their way, they blame everyone but themselves. Maybe these individuals made mistakes, are incompetent, or aren't well liked, but you'll never hear that from them. No, the system, society, the boss, the professor, the electorate, the world is against them. We simply fail to see how great they are. When others don't treat narcissists as the special person they deem themselves to be, the reaction is infantile rage that ranges from sulking to whining to seething and sometimes to violence. They can berate and blame with impunity, hold grudges, and be vengeful. That is their nature. Overvalue self, devalues others. Because they see themselves as special and unique, narcissistic personalities tend to see everyone as either marginal or inferior. They become masters at putting others down in order to elevate themselves. They are the bullies of the world. That's how businesswoman and hotelier Leona Hemsley got the moniker the Queen of Mean. She wasn't just mean. She was by all accounts a bully toward anyone she deemed below her, no different from the kind of bullying we see today in schools. If bullying seems to be on the rise and the consequences of bullying, absenteeism, depression, anxiety, suicide, are becoming ever more dramatic and extreme, it is no accident. Many clinicians are of the opinion that as narcissism has increased in the general population, so has bullying, which is a common characteristic of the narcissistic personality. It seems persistent bullying and narcissism go hand in hand. These days, the narcissistic personality doesn't even have to be with you to bring you down. On September 9th, 2013, 12-year-old Rebecca Sedgwick jumped to her death from an abandoned cement plant in Polk County, Florida, allegedly as a result of being tormented online, cyberbullied. This is what can happen when people consistently overvalue themselves and devalue others, a common narcissistic trait. Narcissistic personalities have an uncanny ability to identify weakness or insecurity in others and use it to put others down or make themselves look better. It may be something as subtle as noticing your new watch and then calling attention to their much more expensive one. At a cookout, they'll say things like, "No steaks, only hamburgers," loudly enough for all of your guests to hear. They don't care how you feel. They thrive on belittling others. They are the kind who, sensing someone's nervousness before giving a speech, would say, It must be tough to follow a great speaker. I wouldn't want to be in your shoes. I know, because this happened to me right before speaking to a group in New Orleans. Sometimes, these personalities betray their true nature by berating their spouses or children in public, at social occasions, or at kids' sporting events. If this is what they do in public, imagine what they do at home when outsiders aren't looking. Or they'll make contemptuous comments with caustic indifference about how stupid or incompetent somebody is. They'll bark commands at a passing waiter for service and then turn to you with a smile as if nothing happened. At an event I attended years ago in Las Vegas, a speaker screamed at the hotel staff in front of about 150 attendees. "I didn't come all this way to look like a fool. Fix it!" When the microscope stopped working, everyone's jaw dropped. Such behaviors should serve as telltale clues to all who see or receive such treatment in that they are in the presence of a narcissistic personality. Instead of empathy, you'll find arrogance and entitlement. A person who feels superior in others will have limited ability to empathize. While most of us learn as children how to understand others' feelings and how our actions affect others, with these personalities, sympathy or understanding for your situation and feelings is limited or non-existent. You could be in a crisis and somehow you still won't be the center of attention, because nothing must detract from the needs, wants, and desires of narcissists. You may have a sick child you need to attend to, but they still want you to take them shopping at the mall. In fact, narcissistic personalities view revelations. I'm adjusting the mic quickly. Sorry, I lost my page. Found it. About needs, illness, or mistakes as weaknesses in others that confirm their superiority and justify their devaluing behaviors. Some narcissists telegraph their arrogance and haughtiness. It's palpable. It's palpable in how they speak, react, and even carry themselves. Others recognize the need to be at least appear to be empathetic. Their empathy, however, has an agenda, such as when a boss calls you at home when you're sick to ask how you're feeling, but is only really concerned when you're coming back to work. It may seem like as if they care until you discover how superficial and infrequent their interest in your life and well-being actually is, except when it affects them. Still, others betray their hyper-evaluation of themselves only when there is a crisis. Then their egocentric perspective on the world percolates to the surface. On April 20th, 2010, BP's Deepwater Horizon rig exploded in the Gulf of Mexico, killing 11 rig workers and causing the largest accidental marine oil spill in the history of the petroleum industry, or the world for that matter. About the disaster and its effects, Tony Hayward, BP's CEO, remarked to a reporter on May 30th, "We're sorry for the massive disruption it's caused to their lives. There's no one who wants this thing over more than I do. I'd like my life back." The term jaw-dropping would apply here. We're talking about an environmental disaster of historical proportions coupled with the deaths of 11 humans. And he says he wants his life back. Sometimes it takes a crisis to reveal those narcissistic traits that say, "Nothing is more important to me than me." The more you talk to narcissistic personalities, the more you get the sense that they don't care about you. They're not very inquisitive about you. What they really want is for you to pay attention to them and to their needs and desires, or to do their bidding. But because they're hyper-aware of how they appear to others, they can, in many cases, modulate and moderate their behavior to control how they're perceived. They can do this for a while, but in the end, their true sentiments will come out. Narcissists act nice to get their way, not to express true caring. In the movie Goodfellas, rising mobster Henry Hill, played by Ray Liotta, uses attentiveness to court Karen, his future wife, treating her to great restaurants, front row seats, the best food, the best wine, no waiting in line. She is the focus of his total attention. Once they're married, boom, it's over. The narcissist has worked for and got what he wanted. So what's the problem when he comes home drunk, smelling of other women? What his wife wants doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is when he feels he's entitled to. Is what he feels entitled to. He has used attentiveness to ensnare, but he doesn't really care. In real life, financier Bernard Madoff used connections and friendships to ensnare trusting people in his Ponzi scheme. The crushing difference between what they expected and what they got is the terrible truth of relationships with a narcissistic personality. You expect to be treated as an equal, as a friend, but a narcissist has no equal. For the narcissistic personality, friends are functional. They serve a purpose: to provide the narcissist with something wanted or needed. The most dangerous narcissists are those whose utter lack of empathy and high levels of grandiosity verge on psychopathy, the ability to do harm without remorse. They have no conscience and will exploit others emotionally, financially, and sometimes physically. If you please them, you are convenient. If you displease them, you are more than an inconvenience. You're something they must debase or perhaps destroy. When we read about a parent who incarcerates, abandons, or murders his or her own baby so that the parent can have a good time and party, what we're dealing with, first and foremost, is a narcissistic personality. Someone who overvalues himself or herself and devalues others with reptilian indifference. That reptilian indifference is what we see in major cities and elsewhere in the phenomenon known as knockout assaults, in which the unsuspecting, including elderly women, are targeted for a blindingly fast punch without provocation, just to see if the person can be knocked out, usually causing a concussion, with a single hit. To behave with such callousness, one has to be able to devalue others, a trait the narcissistic personality has in abundance. Takes shortcuts, bends rules, violates boundaries. Because they feel entitled, narcissistic personalities may feel they don't have to work as hard as others, that they can take shortcuts to get what they want, or that the rules don't apply to them. This is how you end up with politicians who have affairs, father children, and attempt to deny their paternity. Former U.S. Senator John Edwards. Turn public funds into their own private piggy bank. Former U.S. President Representative Jesse Jackson Jr. Or are willing to sell political favors for a price. Former Governor of Illinois Rod Blagojevich. One executive told me about hiring a manager who was fairly successful, but who was then suddenly flirting with his female coworkers, and who was suddenly starting. Let me try that again. One executive told me about hiring a manager who was fairly successful, but who then suddenly started flirting with his female coworkers. It was just as if he just couldn't help himself with the sexual overtures. I'm just making some adjustments with my device. This is kind of uncomfortable sitting here. Okay. Every employee knew such behavior was not tolerated, but when he was confronted, he was enraged, maintaining that nothing in his behavior violated the terms of his contract and that he was merely being friendly. Remember, narcissists don't see what they're doing anything wrong. Don't see that they're doing anything wrong. They feel entitled. They just get angry that someone's pointing out their inappropriate behavior. Some create fictions about themselves to feed their need for recognition. For example, they'll say they're a decorated Navy SEAL, but they've never been even served in the armed forces. And, of course, convincing proof is never available because their work is secret. It's bad enough when someone pretends to be a military hero, an affront to all who served. But when someone pretends to be a doctor, pilot, or other professional, and people trust that person with their health, life, or savings, that is perhaps the ultimate betrayal of trust and ethics. Such violations undermine society and, in my experience, are most often committed by the narcissistic personality. The narcissistic personality is quite gifted and at bamboozling and conning others. This is exactly what Christian Karl Hartreiner, a German immigrant, did, passing himself off as Clark Rockefeller, a member of the iconic Rockefeller family. He ended up marrying Sandra Boss, a respected businesswoman, and having a baby with her. When she discovered all his lies and sought a divorce, he kidnapped their child. Who could do such a thing? An unaccomplished narcissistic personality seeking to be recognized, that's who. I remember when a woman named Sarah, a widow, came to the FBI seeking our aid. I was assigned to interview her, and as there might have been possible interstate issues involving fraud, which is a federal offense. Sarah had just paid for her third and last child to finish college. With more free time, she turned her attention to a more charismatic preacher who had recently established himself in town. She was captivated by his devoutness, his knowledge of so many things, and how easily he made friends. His attentions led her to assist his spiritual laborers to build up his church, committing almost $30,000 that she had saved. But after she handed over the money, the preacher vanished. I talked to Sarah 3 years after this happened, and she was still stinging from this financial calamity. She had lost most of her savings, and her children were upset that she'd fallen for this grifter, and as other elderly women had done. But equally heartbreaking was her revelation to me that she had lost her spirituality and trust in others. With their boundless sense of self-importance, narcissistic personalities lack clear boundaries. They push the envelope with people, laws, rules, and social norms. As social puppeteers, they view others as extensions of themselves, commanding, directing, manipulating, and using people to meet their desires. For example, on a date, flirting, teasing, kissing, and caressing are inducements for sex for the narcissist. A woman may want to stop at some point and go no further, but the narcissistic personality feels entitled to do as he pleases. For him, the words no and stop have no meaning. Those words are speed bumps, not stop signs. This is what we mean when we say that the narcissist has no boundaries. Every time you hear of yet another CEO who lies about the financial worth of the company and puts his or her employees at risk financially, you're witnessing a narcissistic personality in action. Jeffrey Keith, Jeff Skilling, and Kenneth Lay were responsible for the collapse of Enron in 2001, at the time the biggest corporate bankruptcy in U.S. history. Both were convicted of conspiracy and fraud, but that was little consolation to stockholders who had been lied to, and to the more than 20,000 Enron employees who were encouraged to invest in a company near collapse. They lost their jobs and life savings. To allow something like this to happen requires a shocking degree of self-entitlement and grandiosity, and a gross lack of empathy, qualities that the narcissistic personality has in abundance. When we read or hear about a priest, camp counselor, or coach who sexually violates a child, we're talking about a narcissistic personality who doesn't respect human rights. Ever notice that when these individuals get caught, they don't apologize? They don't, because they feel entitled to violate children in the first place. When I look at Jerry Sandusky, retired Penn State coach and convicted serial child molester, I see a narcissistic personality and a deplorable human being who used children like a theme park. Not one apology came from his mouth. He deserves scorn as well as a lifetime in prison. He may have been a revered coach who did nice things, but he wasn't a good person. That is part of the narcissistic pathology. Need to control. People sometimes joke that they're control freaks, but if you ever had a controlling boss or mate, you know it's no joke. A woman named Matilda fell for a handsome man who, like her, was from Latin America. She remained at home while he worked, and he was always on top of the family finances. That worked well in the beginning, but after a while his control became suffocating. She grew tired of asking him for money for groceries, new clothes, and Christmas gifts. When she'd bring this up, he'd say, "Don't I take care of you? Haven't I given you everything? You shouldn't worry about such things." He left her not long ago for another woman. This man, who at first seemed so generous, kept Matilda so much under his control that she had no idea how much money was in the bank or even where the money was. Now in her 50s, she's working several jobs. She has no money in the bank, no credit, no retirement savings, and he is unresponsive to her pleas. Her self-worth is as low as her financial worth. She tells me tearfully, "I have nothing, and I gave him nothing." Here's a woman who placed her trust in someone who robbed her of her freedom and dignity. How did it get this way? As most things like this do, one step at a time into the abyss of the life of a narcissist. Narcissists often seek positions where they can control others. That's why you tend to see more of them in jobs such as law, medicine, and politics, or in high-level executive positions, where they can use their rank or status to take care of themselves. I recall an interviewee for an FBI position saying to me, "Once I get that badge, nobody will mess with me anymore." Needless to say, his application was rejected as soon as he left the room. It's not unusual for narcissistic individuals to seek jobs where they can exercise power and authority to control others rather than help others. In the end, it doesn't matter how high or low the position or the title. It will be used for the narcissistic personality's own gain. When you read that a member of a club, organization, or associated is a self-centered tyrant, or someone who has been embezzling money for years, think first and foremost of a narcissist. That is what they do. Words that describe the narcissist. Over the years, I have collected the words of those who have lived with, worked with, or have been victimized by dangerous personalities. These are the words of those I've interviewed or who've called the FBI or me personally, requesting assistance. When asked to describe these dangerous individuals, most people aren't politically correct and may not know clinical or medical terms, but they speak from the heart because of their trauma, hurt, or fear. These are their uncensored words, not mine. Perhaps some will sound familiar to you describing someone you know. These words alone are instructive and sound a warning worth noting about these individuals. Abusive, actor, aggressive, immoral, arrogant, articulate, beguiling, bullshitter, bully, calculating, callous, chameleon, charismatic, charming, cheat, clever, cold, conman, conniving, contemptuous, controlling, criminal, cruel, cunning, dangerous, deceitful, deceptive, dehumanizing, deplorable, dishonest, disingenuous, disruptive, distractive, domineering, egocentric, evil, exploitative, fearless, forger, fraud, glib, grandiosity, guiltless, hostile, impostor, inconsiderate, indifferent, infidelity, insensitive, insincerity, intense, interesting, intimidating, irksome, irresponsible, irritating, king, lawbreaker, liar, lord, loveless, Machiavellian, manipulative, mean, mesmerizing, narcissistic, Nazi, noxious, nuisance, parasitic, peacock, pedophile, player, predator, predatory, preoccupied, pretender, promiscuous, radiant, rattlesnake, risk-taker, ruler, sarcastic, seductive, self-centered, shallow, showman, slimy, smooth, snake, sneaky, superficial, swindler, tactless, temperamental, toxic, two-faced, tyrant, unapologetic, uncaring, uninterested, unreliable, unscrupulous, unsympathetic, vile, vindictive, witty. Whew, that was a lot of words. Okay. That was just a side note. Now back to the story. Their effect on you. Narcissists can be hard to spot at first because they may be intelligent, engaging, and interesting, even exuding an aura of omnipotence. They can be charming to those who can help them, but eventually they show their true colors. Sometimes you'll see overt displays of arrogance, haughtiness, or grandiosity that give you insight and may also make you feel that something isn't right. At other times, they can be aloof, patronizing, and distant, which leaves you with an unsavory feeling. Sometimes they withhold their affection, or they refuse to help or to honor their commitments. Whatever they do, the effect is always the same. They leave you feeling troubled, unfulfilled, or tormented. Narcissists can be subtly cruel. When they intentionally fail to validate something important that you've accomplished or any pain or suffering you may be feeling, by their deliberate indifference, they leave you to wither in lonely triumph or suffering. They are simply unwilling to take the slightest interest. To do so would be to make you feel good, and that's not what the narcissistic personality wants. Because they are so limited in empathy, they are like half people looking for someone to complete them. Yet when they find someone, things go downhill because no one can really fulfill a narcissist, and they really aren't capable of fulfilling someone else. Think that you can make Thinking that you can make things work with a narcissist will take a terrible toll on you emotionally, psychologically, and even physically. And that's their chief effect. They wear on you. Narcissistic personalities see your needs, wants, or desires only as distractions or as obstacles to their own. If you are inconvenienced, unhappy, frustrated, or stressed out, it's of no concern to them. But they don't get their way when you see their reaction. Eye rolls, contemptuous displays, pouting, impatience, petulance, huffiness, ranting, or they might just walk away. They're rather like children in adult bodies. At times, we feel the pain of being with a narcissist instantly. At other times, it registers like a dagger stab a few seconds later. Did I just see/hear that? We may be jolted awake at 2 o'clock a.m. as our subconscious kicks in and alerts us to do something hurtful that they've done or lied about. Or the behavior triggers the sensation that something isn't quite right. Some people feel confused or physically queasy at these times. Some get sick or stressed out. I've had people tell me, when I have to deal with this person, I don't need breakfast because I feel like I'm going to throw up. If you have these negative sensations, pay attention. Many of us have been taught to forgive and forget, especially with family and friends. The narcissistic personality is counting on you to do that. Because when this person hurts you again, and you're sitting there feeling startled, speechless, or defeated, the narcissist is feeling elevated, superior, and fulfilled. These emotional assaults will deplete you until you become putty in the narcissist's hands, or you have to take sick leave, as many do, just to cope. Pathological narcissism can go to extremes where laws often fail us. One woman came to the FBI to seek assistance in a domestic matter. Unfortunately, there was little that we could do other than refer to her to social services. She reported that for years her husband made her and her children sit on the floor whenever he called family meetings to castigate the family about this or that. Yes, he sat on a chair as if on a throne, and she and the kids had to sit on the floor as they were berated or made to reveal their feelings. Eventually, she was able to extricate herself and her children, but at great financial expense, and not before she and her kids had suffered significant psychological damage. Here was a case of narcissistic personality wanting to debase his family to feel superior. Police departments around the country and around the world see this every day. The details are different, but the intent is the same, the glorification of one at the expense of others. When they're when they aren't putting you down, narcissists are just being nasty. As Claire reported to me about her manager, he'd pass my desk and literally dump his work on it with a scowl. Files would scatter, coffee would spill. He didn't care what I was doing or that my desk wasn't his dumping ground. I can't tell you how many people he made cry. Cry? Who even does that kind of thing? Every time I hear of a woman or child who was repeatedly berated in public, beaten, or subjected to some form of domestic abuse, the first thought that comes to mind is that there's a narcissist in the house who devalues his partner or child and overvalues himself so much that he can slap, strike, or beat a family member. The case of Hedda Nussbaum and 6-year-old Elizabeth Lisa Steinberg, who lived with the Nussbaums, is a reminder of what it's like to live with a narcissist who gets away with abuse behind closed doors. Nussbaum, a book editor at the time she met attorney Joel Steinberg in 1975, has been quoted as initially viewing Steinberg as godlike, submitting to his direction on how to get ahead in business. But her life with Steinberg was anything but heavenly. He habitually criticized and denigrated her to the point of making her crawl on the floor like an animal. He would beat her almost daily, so much that he disfigured her face. In 1987, in a fit of rage, he took it out on Lisa, killing her. It's a tragic example of how people involved with these narcissistic personalities over time are rendered pliant or inert. It was evident to prosecutors that Hedda had herself been so brutalized by Steinberg that she could not rise to defend an innocent child nor seek medical aid for Lisa. She personified what came to be called battered wife syndrome. More than 30 years later, it's still painful to think about what happened to Hedda and Lisa. Not everyone who associates with a narcissistic personality will suffer as Hedda and Lisa did, but know this: every person I've talked to whom has associated with a narcissistic personality has said the same thing. One way or another, to one degree or another, they were forbidden to flourish. How did they feel? In their own words, small, insignificant, inferior. Enough said. The narcissistic personality in relationships. Narcissists cannot express love as we understand it. For them, it's conditional or comes with strings attached. In other words, I will do this for you, but I expect certain things from you in return. For the narcissist, love is about quid pro quo, something for something. It is not altruistic. People who have been romantically involved with a narcissist often tell me that in the beginning they were mesmerized by the person's charm, intelligence, attentiveness, and grand gestures. Much as I described Henry Hill's early courtship with Karen in the movie Goodfellas. All of us are vulnerable to the narcissist's charisma and charm. But once an individual commits to the narcissistic personality, the charm quickly fades, leaving us at a loss to reconcile the alluring person we knew with the indifferent, manipulative partner we now face. At home, these individuals may demand that everything stop when they walk through the door. If they're a stay-at-home spouse, then your whole existence is about catering to their needs. And whatever you do, it's never enough. The narcissistic partner is never satisfied with your appearance, habits, tastes, activities, and abilities. Criticism can range from that look of disapproval to nagging and insults in private or in public. I asked one woman how often she was criticized by her spouse. Her answer was sobering. Every day, every single day of my life with him, I never did anything right in his eyes, and he taught the kids to criticize me and laugh at me as well. A friend of mine, now divorced, tells of spending hours searching for the right gift for his former wife. When he finally presented it to her, she tossed it on the counter and said, "Thank you," as if being handed a glass of water. She didn't even take it out of the box, he said. This seems like a small thing, but she had done this to him so many times over the years that it bore witness to the fact that she didn't care about him, but rather, as he discovered in other ways, cared only about getting ahead. She was using him to advance her career. This type of invalidation is consistent with the narcissistic personality. Want to make people feel worthless? Cheapen their efforts and don't recognize their goodwill. Take no interest. That's how the narcissistic personality does it, and it hurts. The narcissistic personality's craving to look good at all costs, can have devastating consequences for the rest of us. That's what happened to Miriam, who sought the help of the FBI because her husband had moved overseas and left her with no money. She wanted the FBI to track him down to claim the money he took from their joint bank account. According to Miriam, her husband was obsessed with buying even more expensive houses in better neighborhoods, nicer cars, and pricier jewelry, while insisting on membership in 2 country clubs. She began to sense something was wrong, she claims, when he started telling her to cut back on outings, summer vacations, clothes for the children, and food expenses. The latter was the last straw. He was still spending nearly $3,000 a month in club fees while asking her to cut back. She finally confronted him as she didn't work and wanted to know what was going on. He turned to her and said almost casually, "We were bankrupt." There was no money left in the bank. Even though he owed millions, his narcissistic need to maintain his public image meant that he still had his hair and nails done every week, and he maintained his membership in 2 clubs while Miriam was cutting back on food expenses and having anxiety and panic attacks. Even he just walked away. Eventually, he just walked away, fled the country, and left her, clueless, penniless, and holding the bag as she had co-signed on some loans. The depth of his callousness was breathtaking, and she discovered with each new phone call from a debt collector, an attorney, or attorney. When she eventually tracked him down overseas, his response was, "I owe you nothing. You had it pretty nice thanks to me for many years. You lived in a gated community. You should be thanking me." The story of Kim is equally sad in a different way. She approached me at an event where I spoke and asked if she could talk to me about something personal. She had married a man older by 9 years, a man with big plans who pursued her with such vigor that eventually she and her parents relented, charmed by his enthusiasm and persistence and his grand vision for their life together. But once married, she told me, nothing she did satisfied him. First, he insulted her privately, calling her ignorant, dumb, foolish. But in a short time, he did it publicly, and much to her embarrassment. He blamed her for his failures in politics, not realizing, as she and her parents later did, that he was just a lot of hot air, unable and unwilling to accomplish anything he set out to do. Her friends disappeared as he disapproved of people who didn't measure up and made their visits unpleasant. She told me that she hadn't been visited by a friend in more than 10 years and rarely went out so as not to expose others to him or their troubled relationship. When her kids were growing up, they were forever chastised by him, and she was more reluctant to step in when he spanked them really hard. Most of the time, she turned a blind eye to his pelting words, because she said the pain of dealing with him wasn't worth it. She had put it. She had, as she put it, nothing left to fight him with, nothing left to defend. Kim had been battered not with fists nor or a stick, but with constant vitriol and humiliation. Vitriol. I don't know. Pictures of her from two decades earlier show her vibrant, happy, and radiant. But when I met her, she was in her late 40s and had wilted emotionally and physically, her face reflecting the life she'd been living since turning 22. She looked defeated. Both Kim and Miriam, in their own ways, said the same thing to me. If only I know what to look for. As a parent, the narcissistic personality doesn't have the emotional bandwidth to be truly giving to children. Just as narcissists idealize themselves, so they may expect perfection from their children, pushing children to be the best, even at things the children don't like or aren't good at. But may try hard, attempting to win the parents' approval, and constantly raising the bar. Why didn't you get an A? Too bad you didn't make varsity. I know you can do better than that. Picture the stage mother and the raging father at the kid's soccer game. The parent who sees the child's failure to get into his alma mater or join her sorority as a reflection on him or her. Or these other parents may use children as pawns to bring fame or fortune to themselves. For example, by pushing their children to win beauty contests or sports tournaments, make television appearances, or perform some other public or profitable endeavor. They'll swear that they're doing it for the child's benefit, never able to admit their narcissistic delight and fame by proxy. For narcissistic personalities, the light must in and hold on. For narcissistic personalities, the light must in the end shine on them, even if it has to go through their children, but it must never fade. A woman at one of my behavioral seminars talked about being so wounded by being relentlessly pushed as a competitive athlete by her narcissistic mother in that adulthood that she cut off all communication with her. Her sense of I'm being used left an emotional gulf between them. If children fail to be perfectly athletic, studious, beautiful, or obedient, the narcissistic parent will begin to distance himself. Eventually, the child may be seen as more of a burden than a source of pleasure. Some narcissistic parents view children as convenient labor. Carolina is one such mother. In her 50s, she started adopting children from what she called the lower classes, groomed them to work around the house. She said she'd say to them, even in the presence of outsiders, how they needed to take care of her in her old age because she had rescued them and it was their debt. Sad, really, how easily some devalue others, especially the narcissistic personality. Eventually, according to the commission who worked on this case for the state, These adopted kids were able to emancipate themselves from this very selfish woman, but they suffered. As one of them said to her court-appointed counselor, even in the orphanage, life was better. I wasn't loved there, but at least I wasn't made to feel like a slave. And you thought Cinderella was just a fairy tale. It can be worse. There are untold cases of children going without food or medical assistance because their narcissistic parent couldn't be bothered or didn't feel obligated. They may even be tied to beds, locked in rooms, put up for adoption, or even killed. It's heartbreaking to see how children desperately continue to seek the narcissistic parent's attention, even as it's rationed out a few minutes here, a few hours there, not understanding that this parent can't love them as they long to be loved. As they grow older, they realize just how little they've been given, at what price, and with what strings attached. Any problems they have Any problems they have will be met with indifference or some version of "get over it. It's not so bad," or "don't be a crybaby." That's nothing compared to what happened to me. Amanda still carries the emotional scars of growing up with a narcissistic mother. She wrote to me seeking advice, having read some of my books. If you ask her, she'll immediately tell you she never felt loved as a child. Ever. How terrible that must be. It seemed to her that she could never please or do anything right. Her mother was always questioning, challenging, ordering, never asking, inquiring, or showing much interest in her needs, wants, or desires. She wonders aloud why she feels so empty. It all goes back to how she was treated, as if she were nothing. Amanda reminded me that these childhood wounds then reopen repeatedly. What's the right Mother's Day gift for someone who criticizes everything? What do you write on the birthday card of a father who had no interest in you? If you move away, how often will you visit that person who didn't respect you or didn't show you love? Will you take on elder care duties? What will you say and do at this parent's funeral? Will you even go? Sometimes parents who know no boundaries raise a child who also has none, overindulging their child as they do themselves. Thus the child internalizes the parent's narcissism. And narcissism moves from generation to generation. Yes, children can be taught indifference by their parents. They grow up having little sympathy or respect for others. You can even socialize a child into being nasty, denigrating others while feeling entitled. It's no surprise, then, when these individuals become bullies, either in their youth or as adults. We shouldn't expect flowers when we have planted and watered weeds. Encounters with the narcissistic personality. Whether they're backstabbing you out of a promotion, belittling you in a meeting, or butting in line at the checkout, these personalities don't care if they inconvenience, intimidate, or infuriate you in their quest to take care of number one, themselves. Every time I hear of a boss, manager, coach, teacher, or coworker who snaps, barks, yells, screams, throws things, or bullies, I know we're dealing with a narcissistic personality. There is no excuse for any of those behaviors, and a shame on an organization that keeps such a person around. Adults who act like children do serious damage in the grown-up world. And the greater authority, the wider and more devastating their wake. Since narcissistic personalities have outsized egos, they also have an outsized sense of what belongs to them. In one FBI case I personally investigated, a government contractor who was working with highly sensitive and classified. Whoops. Oh man. As I stepped away to go get something to eat, but it kept recording. I forgot to pause it. Oh man, that's such an amateur move. My mistake. I'm sorry. I'd probably try to edit it out, but I know nothing about how to edit it. So, I mean, if someone could help me with that, that would be really, really nice. I would much appreciate that. Okay. I'm gonna find where I was so I can continue it. I got some lemonade and some macadamia nut popcorn. That stuff's good. Like, oh man. Ain't no doubt about it. Okay. I'm gonna pause this while I look for my part. In one FBI case I personally investigated, a government contractor who was working with a highly sensitive and classified material contacted us for help after the computer systems administrator had taken over the company's computer. A review of his communications over the years with his superiors revealed him repeatedly bragging about how important he was and how I did this or I did that. He would often speak of or even insist that these were my systems, my network, my codes, my protocol. They weren't his, of course. He was an employee, but his narcissism was evident in his writings. In the end, outside experts had to come in after hours and reclaim the system. And that is the problem with narcissistic employees. It may be your company, your assets, or your job on the line, but they don't see it that way. They think it belongs to them and take risks at your expense. In the end, we pay the price for the narcissistic personality excesses, often at great physical, psychological, or financial cost. Narcissism isn't just about possessiveness. It can escalate to violence that all too often goes unreported. A good example is the boss who throws things at you, grabs an arm, or, as in one case reported to me at a conference, blocks the doorway with his body and pushes a worker back into his office. What is unsettling is that the worker never reported this to his own organization. But this wasn't the first time that this had happened, nor the last. He had done it to others, but as this employee related, we have become accustomed to this bully. Unfortunately, people often dismiss or ignore these and other outrageous behaviors, saying they aren't so bad or won't happen again, or that it's easier to just tolerate the errant bully, especially if he's the boss. So they let themselves be bullied and steamrolled. Problems get swept under the rug. Their good ideas aren't brought up because no one wants to risk being belittled, and valued workers get fed up and quit. Sometimes a narcissist's dysfunction becomes so entrenched that others cover for them, or they start to think that these out-of-bounds behaviors make sense, or excuse them because the person is brilliant or okay most of the time. No, sorry, not okay. Because you pay a heavy price for that kind of obnoxious nonsense. These incidents need to be reported where possible. Certainly HR needs to be made aware immediately. If for whatever reason you can't or don't do so, then record it immediately on a calendar, in an email, or to others, or even to yourself on a cell phone, anywhere. Just make a record of it. Exactly what happened and what was said, when and where. Why? Because these individuals don't change. And if things get worse and the matter comes up for review or there's civil action, whomever has the most accurate record of events wins. Narcissists aren't going to jot down, I physically pushed so-and-so today, or I called so-and-so a blank today. They don't see anything with what I did. But you need to write it down and share it with others. For more strategies on dealing with a narcissistic personality, see Chapter 6, Self-Defense and Against Dangerous Personalities. At the end of the seminar I gave in Virginia on dangerous personalities, a high-level executive approached me and asked if I would mind calling his boss, who could not attend the conference. They had a problem employee who met the criteria of a dangerous personality, and he felt I should talk to the CEO. I was shocked by the phone conversation I had with the CEO on my way to the airport. This employee's behavior had gotten so out of hand that it threatened the company's solvency. This executive told me one gut-wrenching story after another of total abuse of trust on the part of this individual who had compromised the personal information of clients, credit card information of clients, as well as fellow employees, vital strategic data about company plans, and more. As if that weren't enough, the company was basically grey-mailing. Example, stopping just short of blackmailing the CEO and other executives by threatening to use that information if he didn't get his way. The CEO had tried everything to placate this individual and work within HR department protocols, but they were getting nowhere. In fact, their efforts to reach out were actually empowering the narcissist. The CEO had been sickened to the point where he was seeing his family doctor and a psychologist to deal with the anxiety this employee was causing him. The narcissistic employee, of course, was just fine. The CEO said this had to been going on for about 18 months. I asked, he is your employee. He makes everyone upset. He is unsettling you and making you sick. And he is being cavalier with private and proprietary information of the company. Is that right? Yes, the CEO replied. Then why is he being kept around? I asked. Because I actually thought things would get better. That's a common answer from those who don't understand a narcissistic personality. They innocently, but ignorantly, think that things will all get better. They won't. Executives have told me they walked away from business deals because the other party was so toxic, so narcissistic, that they and their staff couldn't stand to be in the same room or even on the phone with them. Each time, they thought it would get better. It didn't. In fact, I've heard stories where it got so bad that some became physically sick from dealing with these individuals. As the owner of a shipping company said to me after one such event, Joe, no deal is worth my best people getting sick over, and me worrying the whole time whether I can trust this person. I walked away, and I'm happy I did. Narcissists can reach high levels of in high-powered or high-trust professions where transgressions and abuses of authority can have devastating consequences. When you have a police officer who lies, cheats, and steals, a health professional who believes himself the arbiter of who lives and dies, a coach who sexually abuses trusting children, the potential to do damage increases exponentially. Look at Rita Crundwell, ex-comptroller and treasurer of Dixon, Illinois, who in 2012 pled guilty to embezzling $53 million over a 22-year period. This is an incredible amount of money, which she allegedly used in part to finance her interest in quarter horses. In her position of trust as comptroller of the city gave her expansive access to city funds that she used as a personal checkbook. We hear of corruption by government officials all the time, but the narcissistic personality can be found lurking anywhere. Anyone joining a religious sect that has a narcissistic personality as a leader can be assured of living a life that overvalues the leader at the follower's expense. As for cults, I've never studied one that didn't have a pathologically narcissistic individual as a leader. Jim Jones, Joan Sangana, David Koresh, Branch Davidians, Charles Manson, Shoko Asahara, Asum Shikandro, Shenrikyo, Joseph Di Mambro, Order of the Solar Temple, also known as Order du Temple Solar, Marshall Hempt Herf Applewhite Jr., Heaven's Gate, Brahm Shri Rajneesh Movement, and Warren Steve Jeffs, polygamist and leader and convicted child abuser, were all or notoriously narcissistic, intolerant of criticism, preaching grandiose ideas, highly entitled, setting themselves above others and the law. These individuals will sell you dreams that come at a high price, and you will pay. Alright, I just decided to stop there to get some sleep, and that was the end of part 1. Well, my own part 1. I really hope you enjoyed it. There will be a part 2 coming out soon. Hopefully I'll be able to finish the entire Narcissistic Personality section of the book and can proceed on to the next. That would be really great. And just be sure to just subscribe, like and subscribe, and hit the notification button. So when I do come out with part 2, you'll have it nice and fresh. And I'll probably get rid of 0.5 because I I started editing the video, well, the transition, I will still have the mentioning that that OBS crashed in it, but other than that, because it doesn't seem like a very smooth transition, because I really tried my best to find the part where I read the wrong chapter so I could try to cut that out, but I've already gotten too far into the editing process that I can't really throw that back out. So it's a rough copy for you to listen to. It's more lifelike though. It's more realistic to know that, okay, yeah, you just picked up a book and reading it with us. But other than that, I really hope you enjoyed that, and peace out.